going? Hopping on live. Hello, everybody. Hey, everyone. How's it going? Hey, everybody. Thanks for hopping on, everyone. Just hopping on live here. As I mentioned earlier today, I was not dignifying this constitutionally violating, lawless president. I did not want to dignify his campaign stump of a speech with my presence and just the presence of members of Congress. I think it's really important for us to underscore and state and recall that this moment is not normal. This president is not normal. He is impeached. He is actively soliciting foreign interference into our election. He is violating constitutional norms. He is breaking the law. He is violating the emoluments clause of the Constitution. He is undermining the very institutions of the nation that we are a part of, and he does not deserve to be normalized with the power of state ceremony. And for that reason, I decided to not go to the State of the Union. I did take in his remarks that I can answer any potential questions. Unsurprisingly, he lied throughout his remarks in very disturbing ways. And so, it's... I wish I could say it's shocking, but it's not shocking at this point. And nevertheless, I have a responsibility that I feel very deeply to make sure that I always answer to my constituents and the people that I represent, to either answer your questions or to talk to you all through this regardless. I did have a State of the Union guest, and what we did was that we held a dinner for them in my office, and tomorrow I will be giving them a tour of the Capitol. The family that I brought to the State of the Union this year is a family from our district, from New York 14, and their father was placed in ICE detention this year, and his daughters came to my office to try to get him out, and we were successfully able to work with coalition partners and community partners to get him released. And frankly, I didn't want to put my own constituent, and I didn't want to put my own immigrant families in my community in harm's way by being in a gallery. And I think that, especially when you look at what the president was saying with respect to ICE and all of these other things, I think it was the right call. And so I'm extremely excited for our constituents to be brought around the Capitol tomorrow in a dignified way where humanity is not being debased or questioned. So that's kind of what the essential... that's kind of what the state of things are right now. I'm going to take a look at some of the questions that you all have. So feel free to post your questions here in the chat or put them in the Q&A. I'll take a look at them. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you all have. First question. Why were the ladies wearing white tonight? This was a tradition that began at last year's State of the Union. White is a color of suffragettes, and this year, this term, Congress is celebrating the 100th anniversary of women, I guess I should say white women securing the right to vote. Black women were secured the right to vote in about 1965. But that's, women's suffrage, the amendment for women's suffrage, we're celebrating the 100th anniversary of that in this year. So I'll take a look at some of your other questions? Let's see. People were saying, what were the women of Congress chanting at that one section? So there was a point in the speech where you could hear some members of Congress chanting something, the women in particular. And what they were chanting out was H.R. 3. Because Trump was lying about trying to make sure that people who have pre-existing conditions will be covered and trying to drive down pharmaceutical prices. He is lying right now. His administration is trying to sue in federal court to dismantle the Affordable Care Act, including taking away people's pre-existing conditions. So that was one area where he lied, and the House has actually passed legislation to work on bringing down pharmaceutical prices. And that bill is called H.R. 3. So what you were hearing in the background were a lot of female legislators chanting H.R. 3 when he was talking about pharmaceutical prices. Reaction to Rush Limbaugh receiving the Presidential Medal of Freedom. First of all, the Presidential Medal of Freedom is an extraordinarily sacred award. We're talking about putting someone on the same level as Rosa Parks, for example, in terms of their contributions to American progress. Rush Limbaugh is a virulent racist, but even just on top of that, to do it in the middle of a State of the Union and not even dignify it with its own ceremony as it has, there's all sorts of norms that are being violated, not just for people's humanity, but also it truly just cheapens the value of it. Also, him pretending to be surprised was such a joke. This has been news all day. There have been multiple reports from multiple news outlets saying that Rush Limbaugh was going to receive the Medal of Freedom, and then Trump announced it, and he had to pretend that this was some kind of Oprah moment. Was so disingenuous, and to do that and to give it to Rush Limbaugh when there were plenty of people in that audience that have contributed positively to the fabric of American society, much more, frankly, than he has. But it's red meat to his base. Trump knows what he's doing, and he wants to assert that Rush Limbaugh is somehow on the same level as Rosa Parks. And it's truly nauseating, and this is one of the many reasons why I did not go, especially when he talks about socialism. For a president who seems to care so much about socialism, he really doesn't seem to give a damn about introducing fascism into the United States, and that's a real aspect. Hey, Deco, that's right, isn't it? He's out here. He's getting pretty excited. All right. So let's see. Reaction to so many people of color being highlighted. I think, again, Trump knows exactly what he's doing. Donald Trump has started giving out cash to Black Americans at his rallies. This whole State of the Union was like a game show where he was handing out prizes and surprises and reality TV moments. And this is exactly his political agenda. And, it's not just for political reasons, but one of the reasons why I find it so frustrating that the rights of people of color are constantly negotiated and on the chopping block in politics in general, is this is one of the concerns, because when suddenly the rights of immigrants are controversial, or issues pertaining to Black Americans are controversial, but issues facing white Americans are not controversial and they're bread and butter issues, this is what starts to happen in our political discourse. And I think that we need to be very careful about this. because it's extraordinarily deliberate, and it's being done with a very specific agenda. This also is in line with the fact that Trump decided to make a kind of bogus criminal justice reform advertisement in the Super Bowl. He's being very deliberate in trying to, isn't that right, Deco? Trying to look like he's being great for the Black community, for community of color, etc. Thoughts on the Iowa caucus? Do you think it needs to be phased out in favor of a primary? Y'all, Julian Castro is correct. And I think that this year really highlighted all of the things that advocates have been saying for years. There are a lot of issues with the Iowa caucus, and you're not supposed to say that. Oftentimes people say, you can't criticize. It's an interesting catch-22 because a lot of people say that, you can't criticize the Iowa caucus, and you can't criticize the fact that it goes first because if you ever want to run for president, it becomes like this huge issue. And frankly, I think that there's just a point where we have to put our foot down. Caucuses are extraordinarily undemocratic. And you can see that from the very low voter turnout in Iowa, even this year, in the caucuses. And this is not anything new. This is something that advocates have been saying for a very long time. Disability advocates, advocates for the poor, advocates, racial justice advocates, because caucuses are very exclusionary. If you are disabled, it's very difficult for you to caucus. If you speak two languages, if you're bilingual and Spanish is, or any other language happens to be a primary language for you, caucuses are extraordinarily inaccessible. If you work two jobs, caucuses are very difficult to attend. And the fact that in a primary, the person with the most votes doesn't win is also undemocratic as well. And, shout out to Julian Castro, because to actually bring this up while you're a presidential candidate is, eso se toma ganas. I don't know if I said that correctly, but that takes ganas. And he's right. And it's, especially when we see what happened this week, it is completely inexcusable. Folks, want to throw around a lot of different reasons, and they want to say, it was because we're reporting several numbers. It was because an app. It was because telephone lines are down. But y'all, hundreds of millions of dollars have been put into Iowa over the last year. And candidates give millions of dollars to state parties to make sure, and there was 4 years or 3 years knowing that this was happening to get this right. And for such a cataclysmic thing to happen with low voter turnout in one of the least representative states in the entire country to decide the momentum for the Democratic nominee, at this point, the cons of it are really starting to outweigh the pros. And I say that with all of the love in the world to our organizers and our voters and our family out in Iowa. I think that everything that you all have done over the last year, the work that you have put in, the blood, sweat, and tears that you have put in is incredible. And I want to say, thank you to every single organizer, whether you were on, the Sanders campaign, whether you were on any other campaign. It takes a lot of work to do that, and we're appreciative of it. But really, what are the reasons to keep it? Seeing it, what happened this week, what are the reason? What reason is there to keep Iowa first? What reason is there for caucuses to continue? I think these are very real questions, and I'm not sure if an undemocratic process that is deeply unrepresentative of the country at large, and frankly, like, what would it look like if Arizona was first? If New Mexico was first? If Florida was first? If blue states were first? I do think we need to talk about how this primary process goes on. Should every state vote on the same day? Should there be a rotation in who is first? I think these are all valid questions for us to have. Rally's opening a can. I'll take a couple more questions. I'm taking a look here. What do you say? How do you respond to old men in Congress who say you're bad at your job because you're young? I think that there are a lot of people in Congress who are bad at their job because they are stuck in old ways. That's not to say that they're bad at their job because they're older, because there are a lot of members who are older who kick butt at their job, who are very excellent members of Congress. But there's a difference between being older and being stuck in old ways. And there are also a lot of younger members who are stuck in old ways as well. So I just want to go right off the bat saying this is not an age thing, but it is an era and way thing. And there are some members in Congress who have been here a while, who have always been on the cutting edge of their work. Barbara Lee is an excellent example. Barbara Lee has been ahead of the game forever. And it has nothing to do with how old she is. It has everything to do with who she is and her moral compass. So for folks saying that I'm bad at my job because I'm young, I think that my age and my youth and being the youngest woman in Congress makes me quite good at my job, because I feel like I'm very in touch with everyday people's experiences. I do not come from a silver spoon family. I did not, reverse engineer and decide that I was going to run for office when I was 7 years old in some kind of prep school and have, my parents take me to etiquette class and all this nonsense to prime me for this moment. I'm a normal person who decided that I wanted to do something to help contribute to my community and to help contribute to my country. And I think that my youth helps me understand technology and helps me understand emerging issues in ways that a lot of members who perhaps have not been exposed to those emerging issues as much in their lives have. And I think that, especially when it comes to issues, whether it's technology, social media, whether it's how income inequality is starting to show up in very novel ways in our lives today, more so than it did 10, 20, 30 years ago, whether it's climate change, whether it's student loan crises, whether it's the skyrocketing cost of rent and cost of living, I think that my age gives me a perspective that is not rooted in the 1980s, is not rooted in the 1990s, it's rooted in America today. And I think that, it's an asset. I think it's an asset. And I use it as an asset. All right, taking a few more questions. Thank you all for tuning in. Sorry, y'all. I'm just scrolling through some of these questions. Going through here. So folks are saying, when are you going to be in District 14 next? Would love to meet you in person. I will be back in the district for our full district week at the end of next week. This weekend is obviously, so Congress is in session this week. This weekend is off. Congress is in session in DC next week. I believe, I have to recheck the calendar. And I believe next Friday is when Congress goes into recess for the entire week. So I will be at home in the district for the full week starting next Friday. So there will be a lot of events. We'll have it up on my calendar. I believe that a lot of our events that are happening are going to be organizing-based events. So if you go to OcasioCortez.com, I believe that's my new 2020 URL, you can see and catch up on what those events will be. Taking a look. Someone says, thoughts on the verdict tomorrow? What can we do to move forward? So I'm assuming you're referring to the impeachment verdict. The Senate is going to vote to end the impeachment trial tomorrow. It's very likely. No witnesses, so it's not an acquittal because no trial really happened. No witnesses were called. No testimony is given. So, the Republican Party likes to pretend that they care about rules, but the Republican Party does not care about rules. They do not care about the law. They do not care about the Constitution. They care about power. And they will do everything and anything possible, including breaking the law and inviting foreign interference into American elections in order to expand their power. And that's what they are going to show tomorrow if they vote on ending the Senate trial. But again, it's not an acquittal. There are no witnesses. And, if you get to the point where you or your political party only care about the concentration of power above the law, above our oath, above Constitution, then that is not a democracy. It is not, and frankly, it points to an erosion of the rule of law. It's tyranny. And we're at a very scary point because what Republicans really want is to set a precedent that inviting foreign interference into our elections is okay. And if you can do that, then you can manipulate our elections and then just say, oh, well, the people have spoken. And that's a very scary precedent, and it's a very scary time. And that's, again, why I said that I wasn't going to attend the State of the Union. We cannot legitimize that, and we cannot pretend that that is somehow normal. This is not normal. It's not normal. I didn't not attend the State of the Union because I disagree with the president. I'm happy to attend a State of the Union despite having intense disagreements with whoever is delivering that speech. Where we draw the line is the actual erosion of our constitutional norms and our institution and breaking the law. And that is completely different from mere policy disagreements. We're talking about the actual rule of law in the United States of America. And that is a much deeper systemic threat, an institutional threat, than just a policy disagreement. I'll take a couple more questions and then I'm going to hop off. Thank you all so much for coming in. A lot of folks are asking about thoughts on Pelosi tearing papers up at the end of the speech. I thought it was a pretty audacious move. I do wish that the president was not invited to deliver a State of the Union on this day. I think that there's a lot of complications around inviting an impeached president whose trial is not over yet to deliver a State of the Union and to have a profound amount of state ceremony and coverage focused on what he has to say. And there are a lot of members who are, who went that are now saying they either walked out in the middle of the speech or they said that they wished that they didn't go. And that is because the president peddled misinformation for, 60 minutes straight or however long his speech lasted. And that is the consequence. And again, this is different than saying things you disagree with. We're talking about saying things that are patently false to be aired. And one of the biggest problems that we have in journalism right now is that journalists covering this White House are covering it like they're acting like stenographers and they're not acting like journalists. And so what they're doing is that they're just amplifying and quoting all of the false statements that the president says. And they don't know, and they took years struggling to call a lie, and to call racism. They still can't bring themselves to often call things racist. That is what it is. But when you invite someone to deliver a State of the Union that is, filled with patently false statements, that gets amplified and it gets almost aired without comment, despite the fact that there's a lot of false information there. So, I'm glad that she expressed her discontent, but I think we still need to talk about the larger problematic issue of him essentially giving a campaign speech as his State of the Union. It's not a State of the Union. It's just a rally. And you could hear that by Republican members yelling 4 more years. We're not supposed to engage in electioneering or that kind of behavior on the House floor. They can save that for the rallies where they yell, send her back or whatever. I'll do one more question and then I'm going to pop off here. Oh, someone's being very kind. How are you doing as a person? I know you're doing well politically, but I wonder how you're doing. I'm doing great. I'm doing well. Some days are stressful. Some days are more stressful than others. Obviously, being a woman of color with several million people following online means, and particularly being a Democrat and just being a woman in politics means that I'm going to receive a ton of vitriol, and especially with this president, a lot of the incoming is racist, misogynist, classist garbage. But that stuff doesn't really bother me because I really feel like if you are vocalizing hatred towards another person, I don't feel that. That blackens your heart, if you feel this need to follow people, listen to someone who you so deeply disagree with, someone who, for example, like you may hate and have to express that hate and do all of that. That's all happening in your heart. It's not happening in mine. And that's